Awesome. Well, feel free to keep the chat going. We're going to jump in. So, first and foremost, I know some folks very likely are in the room wondering how the heck does art connect to product management? And so, first, I want to just ground everybody in what's the definition of art. So, for Merriam-Webster, we have art is the conscious use of skill and creative imagination, especially in the production of aesthetic objects. And as every product manager that I've ever met has used a combination of skill and creative imagination. So I just would love for folks to just claim it in the chat. I am an artist. I feel like that is core to what we'll be discussing today is that we are all artists in everything that we're doing. And honestly, the process of product is very similar to what we find that artists are doing in other fields. So laying out a vision, determining the tools that we need, laying out a roadmap, iterating. This is happening. Yes, thank you, Veronica. This happens, from fashion, filmmaking, authors. We're all really doing a very similar process. And a few years ago, WIP had as their keynote speaker for their conference Diane von Furstenberg, and she spoke directly to this that we are all using this very same process of imagination and then the skill to execute upon that vision. Yes, thank you, Joanna, for joining us. Um, my declaration here is I really want to be the Lizzo of product. And I imagine in our room here today, we probably have a Meryl Streep of product here, very likely a Taylor Swift of product here. There's so many ways that we can use these. Yes, there are so many ways that we can use inspirations of how artists create in their fields and then bring that back to what we're doing in product. All right. So today we're going to go through some of the tools that artists use all the time to help accelerate their creativity and innovation in their fields. And we're going to explore how we can use that here in product. Um, so, yes. I want to just get vulnerable for a second and talk about some of the parts of our work where we really struggle to have creativity or where we feel like we have creative blocks in our work. So if you can throw it in the chat, what are some areas where you feel like you're having creative blocks in the work that you have on your plate right now? Let's see what we got. Anyone struggling with just having creative blocks currently? Yes, yes, Angela. I think that's exactly the thinking out of the box, trying to determine features that align to what customers need when they don't always know what they need. Yep. Having a blank slate. Yep. Love that. Love that. Yeah, when there's really large initiatives and it can just be very hairy and unwieldy of what can we do, what should we do first. Exactly, Bridget. So I had pulled a few product managers from the WIP Slack group, and these were some areas that came up as creative blocks. And I'd say, if anything, that as we think about these creative blocks and we think about some tools that we can use, I just want to highlight that there's a lot of areas of product that really do bring that creative muscle, but there's also many, many ways that we can use tools to address these. Everything from planning your career to meeting, product market fit and aligning to our customers' needs, to doing resource planning with your stakeholders. And so, how do creative blocks show up for you? I think from polling folks in advance, one of the common ways that people said that they experienced creative blocks was just this like freezing, this deer in the headlights, the computer screen staring back at you, the mouse not moving, the keys aren't moving, just the what should I say? But there's a lot of other ways that creative blocks show up for people. Again, both in the arts and in products. I personally declare I struggle with procrastination. But I'd love to hear from y'all in the chat. What are some ways that the creative blocks show up for you? How are they a struggle in your work? Let's see what we got. Yes, the analysis paralysis. Exactly, Joanna. Yep. Anyone else? Well, yeah, the overthinking, the second guessing. Do I have enough information? Is this too much information? What are all the different ways? What if this happens? What to do first? Yes, definitely the critic, and we'll talk through some of these exactly. Just summing it all up, I'd say creative blocks are painful. I mean, it sucks to struggle with all the different ways that we can stumble in terms of letting the creativity really flow. And really, what I want to talk through today are some tools that we can like start having fun again and really get into that spirit of creative flow. Yes, Vivian, I hear you. The can I even do it? Oh, that is one of the worst. Um, so I'm going to get into one of the first tools that we see artists consistently using when it comes to building creativity. First and foremost is building a practice of creativity. What I mean by that is that we really want to think of creativity as this muscle, and we need to find ways that we can do reps for creativity in places that are safe and in mechanisms where we can focus on just creating in a safe space without judgment. One of the best ways to do that is to try other artistic mediums. So here's an example. This is Sylvia Plath, very famous author, but she would often doodle ideas before she would write them. And so, as you think about like, often when we say in product that we need to get out of the office when it comes to like developing minimal viable products, I think there's also the like get off of the computer and explore other ways that we can use other creative mediums to practice ideas. And again, in ways that are low judgment, particularly where we can get out a lot of ideas without trying to fix them or edit them. I often think it's helpful to think about as if our edit mode was broken. So we're just getting out ideas and then moving on. So, like Sylvia Plath, you could do this through doodling. A lot of people also like journaling. You could do this through painting or other mechanisms, but really focusing on building out a volume ideas. I find it's very helpful to do concentration games, just like as you would do in summer camp, this concentration 54, where you're just trying to name ideas in rapid succession. And this is really helpful for folks who want to work on ideation particularly. So I want to do just a quick example of what this might look like. And I want to see if we can bring a couple people onto the stage. I promise this is quick. This is painful. No, psych, just kidding. This is painless. But this is very likely to be fun. And we're just going to do a quick game. Yes, Joanna. Yep, we're going to be referring to Artist Way in this as well. If you can hit the green button, I'll bring you to the stage and we'll just play a quick game. Just need about like 4 people up. Got a couple. Let's see, we got one. Okay. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you. Let's see who else we have. Anyone else? Just need a couple more people. Thank you, Angela. Cool. Well, we can do this. Oh, thank you, Marnie. All right, we're good. So we will just do this, the 4 of us. We're going to play a really quick game of concentration. Yeah, we'll just keep this going. Joanna, Angela, and Marnie, could you just tell me, like, what company you work for or what's the product that you're working on?
I work for Be the Match, which is a bone marrow registry. So I
Love
work in
that.
their ID department.
Wonderful. Angela, how about you?
I work for Upshow. We're a B2B2C startup that works on leveraging in-venue TVs for employee and patron communication and entertainment.
Wonderful. Joanna, how about yourself? Oh, yeah, you might need to unmute, Joanna. Oh, okay. Bridget, how about yourself? What company do you work with?
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, Joanna has been having troubles with audio. I work at Teachable, which helps creators post their online content like courses, downloadables, coaching sessions, just a platform for creators to teach other students.
I love that. Okay. Well, since we have the four of us here, we'll just do a quick round of concentration. I'm going to make this super simple. Bridget, I'm going to use your idea for, I'm going to use Teachable as an example for this. So we'll go in order of first myself, Nonya, then Bridget, Angela, and then Marnie, and then myself, Bridget, Angela, and Marnie. And we will do ways that people learn as a quick game to exhibit this. So if we were to do concentration, 54 ways that people learn. Conferences, Bridget.
Books.
Angela.
Podcasts.
Marnie.
Experience.
Parents. Bridget.
Movies.
Yep.
Peers.
YouTube.
Love it. All right. Thank you guys for joining me. Again, I was like super quick example, but hopefully you can see that, again, just having rapid succession of some ideas. You can use this for more detailed ideation. You could use this for a more specific. And again, if you were doing this with your team or with other people, it's helpful to just practice getting ideas out. And then not trying to go back and fix it or say the what ifs or but whens and all that. So thank you all. I will let y'all step down from the stage. And we'll move on to the next topic, which I know we got some questions about in the earlier parts of the chat, which is converting your inner critic to a coach. And I know some folks said before this overthinking. So we're going to, and the can I even do it? We're going to get right into that. So first, just if you can, throw an emoji in the chat if you struggle with an inner critic. Anybody? I know for me, my inner critic is like this guy I went to middle school with who like tied his sweater around his shoulders and was just a jerk. So yes, thank you. I know I'm not the only one. Well, I think oftentimes when we think about our inner critic and that judgmental voice in our head, a lot of times what it really is a protector for us, and it's trying to protect us from what we perceive as social risk. The more experience people get in their craft, they tend to have an even stronger inner critical voice. And the reason why is because as we get more experienced in our work, we have a stronger sense of what we like and what we dislike. We have a stronger sense of what's good and what's bad, or how we perceive that. So a lot of times, the farther you go in your craft, the more this becomes difficult. What we have found from a lot of artists is that they're really able to convert that critical voice into a coach. And so I'm going to just walk through how this has showed up and how you could really put this into action. So first, my inner critic might say something like, I don't think this is good enough. What my inner coach would say is, well, my criteria for great ideas is that this is engaging for my audience of other women and product professionals. And the ways that I'm working towards that is by getting some feedback from my audience. And what I'm really afraid of is that they won't like it because this is really new content. But actually, the way that I can address that is asking for feedback, maybe doing a practice session, maybe doing a mock version of this, and then I would feel more comfortable with taking the next steps. So that's just an example, and honestly, this is a very real example. I did struggle with that in the process of this presentation, but again, it's very easy to get from this critical voice to an inner coach who is kind, who is affirming, and is action oriented versus an inner critic, which just kind of stops you in your tracks. So when we talked about the last tip, which is really about just artist only time, just creating without judgment, you also want to think about giving yourself coach only times, where rather than giving yourself critic only times, we don't want that. We want no critic only times. We want to give ourselves coach only time, where we look at our work and we say, what am I trying to assess this against? What are my criteria for good? What am I already doing? And what else can I do that will work towards addressing the things that I'm afraid of? And with that framework, a lot of times people are really able to be more action oriented, but also really get into a place of momentum and flow and the fun parts of creativity. I think this is really helpful as people start to think about particularly areas of product where there is an outside stakeholder when it comes to like aligning to your business goals, product market fit, again, aligning to customers when sometimes customers can't articulate their needs. That's really helpful to use this framework. I'm going to just take a quick pause before we go on to some other tips to see if there's any questions in the chat. So if you can just throw in the chat any specific questions that I can answer thus far. Nothing? All right. Well, we will keep moving. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, Marnie. So this next tip is one of my favorites, is use inspiration stealthily. Picasso said, good artists copy, but great artists steal. And I love that quote because it really gets to this, like, how do you use other ideas and do it in a way that is intrepid and is transformative? So as an example, this picture you see at the top, that picture was created by Picasso, and Matisse created the picture at the bottom, and it was a direct response to the Picasso piece created 1 year later. So I'm going to play through what I think that Matisse was trying to convey. He goes, I love this theme of women and solidarity, but instead of just having them stare right at me, I want to show what they're looking at. And I want to make it mine. So I'm going to use my signature, which is like using more soft lines. And I like the little small amount of blue that they have like towards the right, but I want more of that. So let's just use more blue throughout and just a teeny bit of red. So I think that really kind of conveys how Matisse took this piece of art that Picasso drew and made it his own, really stealing the inspiration, not copying the idea. So I think that there's a couple ways that we could convey this. I'd like to bring one more person up to the stage, and we can talk through this for a topic that you have right now. Anyone want to come up? Oh, yes, green button. That's the thing. Thank you, Veronica. Hit the green button if you'd like to come to the stage. And so I'll while y'all are doing that, I'm going to give you the first question, which is identify an artist that inspires you. Thank you, Marnie. Thanks for joining. You want to come off mute? Thank you. And Marnie, you said you're with Be the Match, correct? All right. Let's see. I couldn't hear you that time. Let's try that again. Not yet. No. We're having some audio difficulties. Let's try it one more time. Okay. Well, with that, Marnie, we'll take you off the stage. Veronica, you want to join? I know.
Oh.
Hello,
Thanks.
hello.
Thanks, Veronica. Well, let's see. Veronica, what's an artist that inspires you?
Oh gosh. I think an artist that inspires me is actually I think it's his name is Caspar David Friedrich. He's from many centuries ago, and he had a really beautiful and warm way of painting both landscapes, but also people within the landscape, and some really like themes that were very like profound and spoke to me at the time. So that's someone that inspires me.
I love that. I love that. So, and I think you already answered my first question, which is identify specifically what inspires you. That's great. So you have the artist, you have what you like. So, and can you also let us know like a product that you're working on?
Sure. Yes. So I work at WP Engine and currently working from a customer decision journey perspective to really improve the flow of work through the course of kind of post purchase and beyond for our customers. So that's a little bit about what I'm working on.
Love that. Love that. So would there be any ways where you could like take that theme? I think you particularly called out like this theme around landscapes. But are there anything else that maybe you would want to bring to the like a customer journey flow?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. I'd maybe say that in the same way that landscapes tend to have a lot of perspective, right? They can tend to be fairly looking out over a broad vista or what have you. I think in order to have a really sophisticated customer journey, you have to consider the long term and the personal nature of those interactions. And so I think in that way, there are some correlations to having that big picture view and thoughtfulness.
I absolutely love that. And then my next thing is like, as I think about like reacting to inspiration, I think it's sometimes helpful to think like a contrarian view. Are there any things that you wouldn't want to apply that this artist does, or things that you want to like directly, intentionally do differently?
Sure. I think if I think about a handful of the pieces that I like the most from him, he tends to tend maybe more towards realism than I would necessarily. And so I think a bit more abstraction, I think would be something I would do that isn't contrary to the way that he developed his art.
Yeah, love that. And then for this last step of like combining multiple inspirations, I think there's a couple ways you could do this. You could say, hey, maybe I want to combine this artist with another artist. Or alternatively, you could say, I want to combine this artist with like my signature way of doing things. So how would you think about maybe like combining this artist with other inspirations?
Yeah. Gosh, that's such a good question. I'm not entirely sure how I would approach that, to be totally honest. I think that it might be a matter of trying to understand, knowing, I think we're all here, and many or most of us at the beginning of the chat kind of mentioned like we're all artists in what we do, and the creative process can take many forms. I think potentially looking at combining that with strategic artists, perhaps. Right. and thinking about segmentation and analysis and things like this to be sure that we're finding points of leverage within the journey for our customers.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you so much, Veronica. I know I put you on the spot here. Marnie, I love what you said. Plagiarize, let no one's work evade your eyes. Yes. And I think this is really just a beautiful way of like thinking about how we can take things that we like and copy them. Also own our own voice as artists, where we can combine it with other artists. And then we can react to artists and say, hey, maybe if I were doing this, I would do it a little bit like that. So thank you for that. Yeah, again, I think this is really helpful for product vision. I think you can use this for competitive analysis when you're thinking about competitors and really trying to drill down on not just what are they doing in the product, but like how they're doing it. What do you like? What do you not like? What would you tweak or accentuate, etc. So thank you, Veronica. You can step down, and we'll go on to our next tip. So one thing that I have found that artists do, particularly when you think about artists who are building out series of work, like really works of art, bodies of work, is they really dig into this world of possibility. And so what this typically looks like is like using visualization and world building. I highlighted here SimCities. If anyone's played Dungeons and Dragons, but honestly, I think, or for that matter, if you love any Netflix series where they're going beyond just thinking about one character or one episode, but building that into like, what does this mean for what's going to happen in season 2, season 3, season 4, and building on top of these ideas. So the ways that we could bring this into product is like really think about, okay, one, if I were to build this one feature, what would happen if this was massively successful? Like, meaning, if this happens, then what happens next? And what happens after that? And how does that, and if this is true, that this thing works, what does this mean about all the other interrelated parts? What does this mean for other product teams? What does this mean for other parts of my customer journey? And so you start to see how these like building out one thing can lead to like a future of possibilities. I often find it's helpful to think about, well, what else in my user's day in the life would be different? And when you think about, well, it's not just their user, the singular user that you have, but it might be, what does this mean for their stakeholders, the people in their family, the other goals that they have? Well, how would this change the resources that they have? For example, if you're building a product that helps people save money, what else would they use that money for? What else would happen? So there's really no end to this. But I think this is particularly helpful when you're thinking about road mapping, and also when you're thinking about user stories, that there's a lot of ways that you can put this into practice. If I were to practice this in terms of like our artistic form, and again, it's helpful to build that practice in other formats. I think one is like storytelling. So for example, going beyond our traditional user stories to actually like write this as if it were a saga, as if you were like writing a series of stories with happy ending. And I loved that someone earlier in the chat brought up like sci-fi as an example of artist inspiration, because you could totally do this with thinking about what else would happen to your user stories based on your product. I love to do this in an interactive framework. So using vision boards and collage, even a Pinterest board for representing your customers, and having some ways to like, again, show what else is happening in their life outside of just their direct interaction with your product. And if you were to do this in kind of like more of a like improvisational propless environment, you could use yes and, which is a very common framework in performing arts and drama. But you could also try personifying your customer, try doing a method acting approach for your customer. So I'm going to just pause for a second and see if there's any questions before we move on. Oh, let me see. Yes, thank you. What tips do you have to get started and warm up? Honestly, I think for world building, sometimes I'd say one approach that I use is like starting with one problem. So, for example, going back to the teachable example that someone brought up earlier, you might want to start with one example of, okay, we want to get more teachers to adopt, I don't know, I'm just going to hypothesize here, uploading their course content. And think about one solution to that. Okay, so if our teacher were to upload their course content, well, what else will happen for them? What else would happen in the day of their life? Think about, well, if they were to upload their course content, maybe other teachers find them and reach out to them, and maybe that would mean that this actually helps them connect with other people. And maybe if they connected with other people, this opens up revenue opportunities off platform. Like, you can just keep going with the and maybe, and maybe, and maybe. But I think generally this getting started is pick one specific problem and one specific feature, and then just kind of dig in. And again, you can kind of keep asking these questions over and over again. What else would happen? If this is true, what else is true? Erife, did I answer your question? Let me know if you want to dig in, or if there's anything else I can answer. Thank you. Awesome. So we'll go on to our next tip. And this is one of my favorites, which is bending the rules. So Picasso is one of my favorite artists. Is attributed saying, learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. And I think particularly in our work, it's really common to have just constraints that can feel so unwieldy and so difficult to build around, or or build on top of, for that matter. So I'd love it if y'all can just throw in the chat, like, what are some of the constraints or rules that most get in the way of your work? I don't know if it's budget constraint. Oh, budget. Okay. Yes. I love that, Rosalie. I mean, I don't love budget, but I love that you named that as a constraint. Lack of resources. Yep. Brand guidelines. Oh my gosh. Yes. That's a great one. So yeah, first, I think it's great. Technical challenges. Great that you named the constraints that you have, because that's the best way that we can start to identify how to work around them. And so first question I'd ask, and what we find that artists are asking a lot, is like, under what constraints, under what criteria would these constraints be more flexible? So for example, in what world would this not actually be something that is static or stuck in your way? And in what world would this be more flexible? That might be the as simple as if our CEO is okay with it. But you could also think about other ways, like, well, what other criteria would make those constraints more flexible? Next thing you would want to think about is what could, see, sorry, having some screen problems here. What would make these constraints irrelevant? And, I love that, like, again, taking inspiration from what Picasso has right here. It's that, well, I mean, he felt constrained by trying to create art, two-dimensional art that represented three-dimensional, landscapes or people. And so one of the constraints was, well, like, if you could find a way to show both the profile and direct images of the face at the same time, maybe it would be irrelevant that we would need to work with legacy code if these other things existed. And then I love to also think about, what if you just opposed the constraints head on? What if you just said, look, you know what, we're going to rip the page? What would it look like if we just completely confronted those constraints and acted as if we could completely create a new system that where those constraints didn't exist, or if we could break down those constraints so that they're not a problem. I think another way that you could look at this bending the rules is think about, well, like, what if this problem was larger, or what if this problem was smaller? So thinking about like the scope of the constraint that you have. And you could think about, like, again, like, same thing on the solution side. What if you made the current solutions or the current features that you have, what if they were larger in size? What if they were smaller in size? So you can start to play with scope of your problem or solution as a way of thinking about like bending the rules and working around it. One thing that I've seen has been is like one of my favorite mechanisms is people who ideate for the completely opposite problem. So again, like if you were taking something like I'm gonna use like a teachable example, since someone came up from there earlier. What if we wanted to plan for not having teachers' content online, and we were thinking about all the ways that we could make the content more secure, more private, that people can't find it? And then as you start to come up with these opposite solutions, then you can also actually start to come up with ideas related to, oh, actually, I didn't think about this. Like, if this is the opposite, I didn't think about that. Like, one way that we could do that would be, creating more firewalls or something of the like. Again, then you can kind of start to flip that back on its head and start to ideate for your actual problem after you started to ideate for your opposite problem. Just want to pause here for a second and see if there's any questions. So with that, I'm going to go to our, just to finish up, I know we've covered a lot of different ideas here today. So first and foremost, I'd say, like, the first way that you can get in action is just try practicing these. Try practicing, ideating without editing, and then taking that time to put in place your inner coach. Try world building. Try really thinking about bending the rules and breaking the rules in your practice. A second thing I find is helpful is build a guild. Start to build a safe space where you can share this work and you can share these practices. And again, especially in a space where it's other people who are trying to apply these more artistic frameworks. I had originally had been doing these as more interactive workshops. And so I'm happy to share some ways that you can put these in practice with your own teams as well. This is my first time presenting this at a conference, but normally I like to do this with like glitter and art supplies and a lot more games. If y'all are interested in learning more about these topics, I highly suggest, as someone, I believe Marnie had mentioned in the chat, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron is a really great book on the fundamentals of creative flow. Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, who also wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and The Creative Whack-Pack as well. And lastly, connect with me. I would love to hear more of your questions. Hopefully this has been helpful for some ideas related to how you can put creativity in place in your content. I have a form there in the chat. Thank you, Veronica, for throwing that in. So if you want either some asynchronous resources, as well as if you would like to have like a workshop or something that's more like tailored to your team, again, a lot more hands-on and how we can use some of these artist frameworks. And with that, also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. I know we have a couple minutes, so I just want to make sure I get to any questions. If you can start putting your questions in the chat. Erife, I want to get to your question first. Examples from your experience on how to use a couple of these tools to go from problem to final idea. Yeah, so I'd say first and foremost, when it comes to the ideating, again, I think it's super helpful to have just time of doing that rapid succession. I think it also works really well to do that in groups, and really set the ground rules for the team. Hey, we're going to be an artist only time, so we're just going to create ideas, no editing. And I think that framework generally works pretty well with people. And within that, you can integrate some of the other ideas. You can say, hey, we want to come up just with ideas for a specific problem, but let's also come up with ideas for if we were doing an opposite problem. We can come up with ideas for breaking the constraints of budget, and like, what would we do if budget was not a problem, but also like, how do we just tear up budget as a constraint for our product? Maybe what that would look like is saying, like, how about we have, what if we take this product that we expected X amount of revenue and 10 times that, in the year, and just come up with ideas for that. So that would be some ways that you could get started on the ideating part. Then the next way you could do that is say, okay, let's go into coach mode, where, we're going to make time to refine our ideas, but really with an action-oriented and compassionate approach to this. So not, this is a bad idea, but like, what other steps can we take that would make this more aligned to what we see as our criteria for success? What other steps can we take to make this more aligned to our KRs, more aligned to employer adoption, et cetera, et cetera? Arif, hopefully I helped you with some ideas as it relates to this getting started and getting from problem context to final idea. I think from there, again, you can continue to work on this iteration, but I think using those coaching tools, inner coaching tools, you can also bring your group into that. Just to address some of the other questions, any tips on how to have coach only time? I'd say it's really helpful to make sure that like you're putting it into your calendar, giving yourself a framework. I do think about, like, if you were to say, I'm going to block out an hour, I'm not going to create any new ideas. I'm just going to use this as time of reflection and time to build out my next steps action-oriented list. I think if your product already has criteria for success, that's super helpful. If your product doesn't, come up with your own and use that as like the baseline for coach only times. If for example, I said, my criteria for success is, customer engagement. My criteria for success is feasibility. And a good idea is the thing that I can implement most quickly in I don't know, 1 month or less. Then that's the thing that I would assess all ideas on, and nothing else. And I think the more that you can really compartmentalize what is the criteria for success, makes it a lot easier to not try and like, I guess, assess one idea on like 20 different things. And again, that's where you start to get a little bit more into critic mode. And Marnie, let's see, do you have strategies for recruiting non-product management team members to use these techniques? I think this works really great for pods, particularly, if you have someone from UX, you have folks from, like PMM or product marketing. I do think this works really well to set the ground rules for your pillar on how you want the sessions to go. But I definitely think that bringing in different perspectives is really valuable for this artist and creative flow process. What's most important is that you set the ground rules up front for establishing these. And I think it's less important that this is only for product management team members. Marnie, did I fully answer your question, or did you want me to dig in more there? Thank you. Any other questions? Please hit me up. I'm going to throw my LinkedIn up here. So I would love it if we can become friends. And again, Veronica put a form in the chat. So if you would like more information, or if you would like a workshop for your team, please, I would love to stay in touch. Hopefully this was helpful for you to tap into your inner artist and bring that work to your product teams. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I want to give a huge shout out to my folks who got on stage and played with me. I know I've put you on the spot, and I really appreciate your feedback. Awesome. Thank you all. Much appreciated. Thank you for that. Lovely, lovely. Well, I look forward to hearing more from you. I'm going to stay on until I think we have about 2 more minutes. So I'll stay on in case anyone has any additional Q&As. But again, feel free to reach out. Thank you all. I'm going to close this out. But again, feel free to reach out. And I really appreciate your engagement and participation.